If you haven't burnt out yet, if you haven't become disillusioned with the hope and belonging salesman, if you still believe in existing movements and institutions, then this just might not be for you. However, the hope is that any earnest learner will find something of value here. What you're about to hear is a transmission that is not supposed to be heard, a message that is not supposed to be possible. Nobody is supposed to know this kind of information. What you are to do with it, I don't know. I don't even know what to do with it. It's not just the book that I'll be reading from today. It's not just the next book that I'll be reading from. In this playlist, it is the way that they are brought together under this common theme. It is a theme of coming to terms with the failures of the 20th century. But also, through this kind of reconciliation, my hope is that some sort of new possibilities will present themselves. Something that is not just this race, class, and sex or gender activism, division, or the simulation of the continuance of movements that long ago fizzled out and were appropriated into being little more than the shock troops of HR's litigation culture agenda that seeks to establish increasing control over the lives, minds, and possibilities of humans who've been reduced to nothing more than labor power, consumers, and niche identarian belonging. This is our situation. Is there a way out? I don't know. All right, 3, 2, 1, and we're here. What's up, everybody? Welcome. Welcome.
Yo.
Welcome. Off to a little disjointed beginning here because shit got really confusing last second. But you know what? The last 3 episodes of this, Nance was not involved, and I didn't have these problems. And now that Nance is back, I had these problems, so we know it's all his fault.
It's all it's performance art, man. We can't fucking do anything without having tech issues.
Tech issues, baby. So, folks, if you don't know what it is, this is a series called The Revolution Will Not Be. Obviously, that's a playoff of the idea that the revolution will not be televised. But we live in the 21st century. We live at the dawn of cyber history. We're living through these changes. What does that mean? Well, Nancy's been writing about what it means. I look forward to reading what he's got to say about it. But I'm about to go camping. I know, again, this has been a great series in that sense, right? Like, I keep going camping on this series. But no, I'm going to go off for a couple days and just focus on proofing Mikey's book. And but I was talking with Nance before leaving, and I was like, all right, man, I'm amped. I just want to do it right now. I want to get this chapter out of the way. This chapter from Anti-Bolshevik Communism by Paul Maddock is chapter 4. So you can turn to chapter 4 there. And it's called Bolshevism and Stalinism, right? So it's a chapter that deals with the supposed big differences, mainly between Stalin and Trotsky. Why does this matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, the last chapter that we dealt with was the Lenin legend. The last chapter in this series was the Lenin legend. Nance, I want to check in with you really quick. So, what did you listen to so far in the backlog of this series? Are you caught up, or did you just listen to some Yasha Levine?
No, I just got Yasha Levine. I was listening to Yasha Levine yesterday, which got me fucking amped. I love that book. And I actually, after I listened to Surveillance Valley, I was like, I want to see what else this guy's done. And he's actually done a lot of other shit that I wasn't aware of. So I just opened like a rabbit hole for me to dive down into.
Yeah, I haven't actually looked into any of Yasha's other work. I have no idea what other kind of shit he's done. I just know that this is like amazing. It's like this book has stuck in my head, and it's unlocked a lot for the people who've been following along with this series so far. Like, I love that there was a person at a music festival walking around for 2 days just listening to those 2 chapters and then reading ahead, and that this is all working for that person's dissertation. Like, that's amazing. But yeah, also this is live, and so we've got Luke in the chat. Good to see you, Luke from the Netherlands. How's it going, man? We met Luke when we were in Brussels. He said, "What up? Nance is back. Great to see you again." Yes, Nance is back.
Good to be back.
Yeah. What are you doing today, Nance? What are you working on over there?
I'm so I had like a 1993 grandma desk that was like wood. And it was tight. It was a hand-me-down, and I had used it for years, but it was like rickety and shit was falling down, and it's fucking huge. And we're hopefully going to be able to move this September. Our rent keeps getting jacked up, and it's huge. I didn't want to move it, so I bought a new desk that's just a desk, and it goes up and down too, which is cool. But in order to set my shit up, I had to take all my shit off my old desk, and so I have like a ton of shit. If I can move my camera to show you, it's gonna be fucky because my shit's all rickety right now. But like, I have a ton of just garbage all on my floor that I'm trying to set back up.
And that fucking chest that we lugged across Europe. I see it.
Dude, yeah.
I see.
Fucking, it's so good. It's so good for road trips, but it's such a motherfucker for like that kind of travel.
The worst for that kind of travel.
That thing cost us like thousands of dollars overall.
Yeah. I don't know about thousands, but it definitely cost us like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Yeah. Yeah. Our mysterious benefactor basically just spent all that money so that we could lug a crate around. But
stupid 100-pound box.
The good news
shit that we found out it's better to streamline our setup anyway. Like halfway through the tour, we were like, oh, if we minimize and we just have a small amount of shit, it's actually better content. But we had to learn that lesson the hard way because no one else is doing what it is we're doing. So we're learning that shit. So I don't know, maybe people who are watching this, they'll fucking get a hair up their ass and start doing the same shit.
And by the way, guys, like, we're about to level up in like the most insane way. And I'm not, look, if you all want to try to do the stuff that we've already done, good luck. It's not easy, but go for it. But the thing is we're about to up our game a whole nother level, and it's not going to be easy to do what we're about to do with that either. And that is, imagine if on the tours of the United States and across Europe, if we had actually been live streaming while in transit, while places. Well, there is this thing called IRL live streaming now. It's a thing. I've been going super down the rabbit hole of how to set that up over the last couple weeks. And the biggest problem is that I need like $1,500 to really get going with it. So at the moment, it's mostly research phase, but I've got really big goals here, and I want to make it happen as soon as possible because I could be in the woods live streaming instead of sitting up in this piece of shit office. I could be running a marathon while listening to an audiobook and checking in on the chat and then stopping, the recording every once in a while to say some stuff. Like, there's all kinds of really exciting possibilities with it. I love it. I'm already a content machine. How much more would I be so if I had this? Right?
Dude, it'll be so sick. Like, just imagine fucking in the Tillamook fucking forest, in that magical Polish forest, on the metro in New Jersey, on the metro in Poland, like all these badass iconic places that we've done content that was pre-recorded, like how that'll change with it being able to be live to interact with the people who keep up with it and follow it. I'm so fucking stoked for it, dude.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Okay, now bringing it back to the series here, the Lenin legend is the chapter that was last time, and the 2 times before that, episodes 1 and 2, that was Yasha Levine's chapters 1 and 2 of Surveillance Valley. What's the sort of plot here? In part, this series is supposed to speak for itself. I'm letting the books read themselves to you, and then you can kind of do with it as you will. But obviously, if you listen to the last chapter, I do kind of just give my 2 cents every once in a while. And a lot of it's kind of reactive, where I'm just like, yeah, fucking see, Marxists, they don't want to face this kind of thing. Like little pot shots like that as we go. And as I said before, it's like, no, I really genuinely want to be challenged by real Marxists on these kinds of things. If you're a worldview Marxist and you got a beef with Paul Maddock or Moish Pastone or Heinrich, well then fucking bring it, please. Don't act like this stuff will go away, because what we keep finding, as with Andre Gors, is that people just think it will go away. And it's like, no, every time we find one of these thinkers who is like this sort of post-Marxist, post-leftish kind of thinker who's still got like an axe to grind for the sake of an emancipatory sort of future, but at the same time has this huge problem with actually existing organizing and activism, we get all excited, and then people are like, and they act like how people act when they think that somebody who they canceled 5 years ago should have gone away forever, and oh my God, they're back. Like, oh, Peterson's back. I thought we took care of him like 5 years ago. And it's like, dude, people who have like something to say and, people want to hear what they have to say, they're never going to go away. You can never make them go away. And the harder you try, the more you lend credence to their perspective. And I'm sorry, like this idea that like Andre Gors is like the sole architect of the new left, and that everything bad about the new left comes from Andre Gors, and that Andre Gors writing words on paper is what caused the failures of the working class movements and the student movement to properly back the working class movement. That is exactly the kind of feedback we received. And it's like, no, he's on a bunch of shit that we didn't realize anyone was out there already saying.
Man. And Gors is responding to failures that are already evident. And the criticism that we kind of receive for engaging with Gors, it was like boogeyman, like, oh, he's a boogeyman. And there were several requests for like, okay, can you unpack that? Can you explain? Can you show me how this guy who is kind of predicting the future and saying, hey, this is going to continue to crumble. This is not working. It will not work. Like, how is he responsible for what he is directly criticizing? And we never got any.
Daniel Tutt in that supposed debate, he never, we didn't call it a debate, but he called it a debate after the fact, because he messaged me and was like, hey, I want you to publicly say on your channel that I won that debate. If you don't confess, then I won't come onto your channel ever again. And I was like, dude, it wasn't a debate. But also, like, you didn't win? What are you talking about? We had a conversation. We disagreed. That's all we did, was disagree. That's all we did.
Yeah, man. But that's the way that, for many people, that's the way that this medium works. For many consumers of this fucking content, that's the way it works. But also for people who are positioned to like, all that is at stake and okay, look, I'm not accusing Daniel Tutt personally of this, but for that type of person who is positioned where they need to win, and there needs to be a winner and a loser, and there needs to be like symbolic recognition, and there needs to be cultural cachet and cultural capital, and like that's the way it works. So it's not like we're not even engaging in a conversation with someone from our perspective. We are. And
Right.
it might be naive and it might be foolish for us to continue to want to believe that we can genuinely interact with people and have conversations. But that's the way this medium operates. People are just there to secure their own financial fucking security at the end of the day, and that sucks.
Well, and as we've been getting into with Bourdieu this year, securing your financial security when your job is not the prestige of your function comes from supposedly not being driven by the profit motive, then then it's all about social and cultural capital, and the way you get your symbolic capital is by denying that you have that kind of an interest in it, by acting like it is selfless. It's not selfless. We can be realists about the situation. What we hope is that we are not reducible to the circuit of capital, but we don't act like we are outside of the circuit of capital, right?
Fucking money realism, dude. Money fucking realism. And how many times have people said, "Oh, Dave, you're a fascist because you're charging ridiculously discounted rates for these fucking theory courses and these workshops and these fucking places where you can actually come and try to do something, try to get outside of it. Dave, you're an asshole because you're charging." Go look at other extra academic whatever. Look what they're charging, and then come look what Theory Underground charges. Like, you're the asshole.
But I'm the asshole because you made this point, because I'm within reach, right?
Exactly.
All right, so let's bring it back to chapter 4, Bolshevism and Stalinism. Look, I'm not going to recap everything from the Lenin legend chapter, but it is kind of lame, Nance, that you're in here going to be a part of this and you didn't read. We're going to pause this and Nance is going to go read the Lenin legend really quick. Okay, everybody?
I'll be right back. You're right back.
How about this? Play the believing game. Imagine that every trace of respect that you had for Lenin is decimated, and let's continue reading. Like, and the fact is he's more fair to Lenin than that. Lenin is responding to the contingencies of his moment. He's doing what he can. We just shouldn't call it Marxist, and we should definitely call it good politics of the moment that is opportunistic as fuck. Opportunistic as fuck for sure. But let's get away from this. Oh yes, no, he did something amazing through applying Marxism. No, he didn't. No, one of the main points from that chapter was just like, sorry, the first program that the Bolsheviks rolled out, or not just the Bolsheviks, the Soviets, the first program the Soviets rolled out had nothing to do with the peasants. Literally nothing to do with the peasants. And they lost the peasantry. The peasantry left the armies and went back to their fucking farms because they were appropriating the land back from the landowners. They were doing it themselves. There was a revolution, and Lenin was like, hey, look, the Winter Palace is empty. Let's go inside, guys. And then once they got inside, they were like, cool, we took over the country. And then they were like, wait, where's our army? Where's our food? And the peasants were like, bitch, we're doing our own thing. And then they were like, okay, we've got to change our plan real quick so that we can get those peasants on board. And then they were like, hey, you guys can own property now. That wasn't a collectivizing project. And then once they did try to collectivize, it's too late. You can't. I'm sorry, like, and calling it Marxism didn't help the cause. Just fucking do what you got to do. But like, calling it Marxism, guys, it wasn't helpful. The Lenin legend is not that Lenin is bad. The point is just that it's not like he is the be all end all revolutionary leader, that he's the model that we should be going for when we think about social change. And there's all kinds of problems with it. So I'm not going to go into all those problems. Go listen to episode 3, everybody. But we're going to get into chapter 4, and we're going to start right now. And I'll just start by reading the first couple paragraphs here. I'll read it until the section header break, and then I'll have Nance take it for a few. The alleged purpose of Trotsky's biography of Stalin is to show how... Oh, you got to turn to the page. It's page 61. Oh, wait, sorry.
Yeah,
You did. I had my own thing.
the other PDF up.
I had it in the way of where you got it. Yeah. All right. The alleged purpose of Trotsky's biography of Stalin is to show how a personality of this sort was formed and how it came to power by usurpation of the right to such an exceptional role. That's a quote. The real purpose of the book, however, is to show why Trotsky lost the power position he temporarily occupied, and why his rather than Stalin's name should follow Lenin's. Prior to Lenin's death, it had always been Lenin and Trotsky. Stalin's name had invariably been near or at the end of any list of prominent Bolsheviks. On one occasion, Lenin even suggested that he put his own signature second to Trotsky's. In brief, the book helps to explain why Trotsky was of the opinion that he was the natural successor to Lenin, and in effect is a biography of both Stalin and Trotsky. All beginnings are small. By the way, have you read his biography of Stalin?
I read it a long time ago.
Cool. Yeah. I think a lot of Trotskyists do read that book. It's a pretty important one. So that's why why he starts out right there, you know. That's the thing, is like, when it's like there's always like this like the differences of, what is it called, the narcissism of small differences, right? That is always a factor when it comes to recognition of a figure. So we always have to ask the question if that's going on, and what Matic is going to do is say it's way beyond that. But okay. All beginnings are small, of course, and the Bolshevism of Lenin and Trotsky differs from present-day Stalinism, just as Hitler's Brown Terror of 1933 differed from the Nazism of World War II. That there is nothing in the arsenal of Stalinism that cannot also be found in that of Lenin and Trotsky is attested to by the earlier writings of Trotsky himself. For example, Trotsky, like Stalin, introduced compulsory labor service as a socialist principle. And that's why I don't call myself a socialist, ladies and gentlemen. Fuck that. I know. Here's the thing, what I could do. I could be like Paul Matic and say, well, actually, I'm an anti-Bolshevik communist. But it never turned into a movement. It never turned into a real tendency. There's no place in the world where it's genuinely represented or has any kind of influence. And therefore, it's just this history buff bullshit where you're saying, well, how I would have done it if I was there at the time. And then we have to go, okay, and in the meantime,
like when people, and I for a long time was this guy, and I mean, I still have the tendency to want to kind of cling to this label of socialism or communism or whatever. But like, when you use language that doesn't mean what you think it means to the people you're talking to,
yes,
that's like that's on you.
That's on you.
Like, we just had a conversation offline when we were talking about anthropomorphizing capital and like, what can it do? What are the risks? And I fall down on the side of, yeah, I like to do it, with the caveat of like, I always want to be careful when I do it, and I want to explain why I'm doing it and be able to unpack it. And if I can't do that, like clearly, concisely, briefly, I just won't. I'll find another way to say what I'm trying to say. So if you're going to stand and be like, I'm a communist with 15 pages of caveats and qualifications, people don't give a shit. They're just going to be like, oh, you want us to go to a work camp?
Yep.
Ultimately.
Yep. Well, and I've had, I mean, that is basically the situation with Daniel Tudd or Chris Catrone. It's like Here's what we like about Marxists. They understand that labor power is being exploited. And I mean, so do anarchists. But unlike anarchists, they also know that any real solution cannot come from you and your buddies going off in the woods and doing your own thing, that ultimately some kind of larger scale structural change is necessary. And therefore, they are kind of in this, what we share that kind of puts us in the same field is this assumption that broad-based change matters. And so then they have their ideas about why about how broad-based change could take place. And then we have our sort of disagreements about, so, but we're able to have a conversation because of that shared basis right there. But where I lose it is like this distinction between workers and intellectual workers, and this sort of reification of the idea that it's okay that there's just intellectual workers who'll kind of keep doing bullshit jobs while everyone else is supposed to do shitty jobs, and kind of like no genuine prioritization of large structural changes that would change that situation, and at the same time that would be plausible for actually existing people either alive today or in the near future. And we care more about the near future than we do actually existing people right now, because everyone right now is a lost cause. They care about appealing to people who are actually existing right now, and that makes them a lost cause in a sort of sense. But it's worth still having a conversation. It's still worth trying to understand them, because at the end of the day, they are actual extensions of these movements. At least they see themselves as such, whether they actually are or not. And insofar as they see themselves as such, that means that it's almost like these historical tendencies can speak for themselves, can defend themselves, can critique society from that standpoint. So it's like Trotskyism, Stalinism, social democracy. All of these things have influencers online who try to keep those traditions alive by seeing the world that way. And then they'll be like good Baptists and go back to the book, chapter, and verse, right? And that's great, as long as we're getting an education in this process of having a conversation with them. When they come along and act like it's just all assumed, and of course the left is the only way forward, but they're not even giving you the chapter, page and verse, like they're just going.
We have the truth.
It's just like, okay, well, there's nothing here. You're just telling me to trust you. And I don't trust you. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust myself, and I don't trust anyone else in my life. I shouldn't have to. Like, look, if I'm playing the believing game, that's one thing. And I play the believing game when I hang out with people that I love. But I don't have to love you if you're someone on the internet. And just because we met in a city on tour doesn't mean that I have to love you. Like, actually, I love the people who don't trust you. And I think that they've got a good point not to trust you, and that your entire mode ultimately has to prioritize and center the people who don't trust this narrative of progress, change, history, or ultimately this workerism that's driving all of this stuff. Going back to the page, compulsory labor service being essential to the Bolshevik approach and being a socialist principle, both between Lenin and Trotsky, just that unanimously they agreed on this. That being a dogmatically assumed thing means I don't care. I don't care about trying to court this audience. And so I'm not doing this for a conversation with Marxists. I would be very happy if any of them want to actually go through our sources that we're bringing into this series and then have a conversation with us. And I look forward to being set straight on some of these things. Absolutely. But I'm mainly doing this for people like Mandy, who are getting in my DMs being like, yo, I've been following Gabriel Rockhill and Daniel Tutt because you kind of put me onto them with some of the stuff that you've done. And now I'm like really confused. What movement are they talking about? Like, what do they mean when they say socialism? What? And I'm just like, Mandy, when they say socialism, they mean communism. They just think that socialism is more palpable to the American palate, even though it's not really. They're looking at a Gallup poll from 2016. They aren't keeping up with anything. They're going off of the fact that Das Kapital sold a bunch of copies back in 2016. That's about it. Like, they don't have a lot to go off of in terms of socialism supposedly being so much more palatable. The only reason it was for a hot second was because of Bernie, and everyone's burnt out on Bernie anyway. So the only people who aren't burnt out on Bernie, who act like there's still this thing going on. It's like, well, Tut said it himself. He basically said, like, what we need is more Bernie. Like, that's how the working class gets built back. And it's like, oh yeah, because he didn't capitulate to the woke, progressive, PMC, liberal tendencies that dominate in the media class. Oh yes, he did. He actually fucking did. Repeatedly. And he burnt a lot of bridges that he built in 2016 by the time 2020 rolled around. And he lost the Idaho vote, as well as a lot of other very important votes. So, whatever, dude. Like, no, we need something new and something that's not going to try to be realists about compulsory labor service in the 21st century. It was one thing to be realists about it in 1917 because there was no automation. But we're in a time when we could be putting all the scientists and engineers into some buildings and telling them, come up with a solution. Make it so people have time, energy for their families. Don't call it socialism or communism. Don't call it capitalism. Don't call it anything. Figure out how to functionally get people their time, energy. That's possible. We could do it. But is it possible that could be a demand while we're hitching our trailers to a fucking bygone era and movement? No, it's not. Not even close. Because the moment you start using these signifiers and capitulating to this default audience of hyper-progressive college students that you're assuming, that you always assume, uncharitable, hypersensitive college students is we'll recruit from that base. Well, you've just decided to not be palatable or be able to communicate with anybody else in the country. So, great. Yeah, for sure. Let's do that. For example, Trotsky, like Stalin, introduced compulsory labor service as a socialist principle. He, too, was convinced that not one serious socialist will begin to deny to the labor state the right to lay its hands upon the worker who refuses to execute his labor power. It was Trotsky who hurried to stress the socialist character of inequality, for, as he said, those workers who do more for the general interest than others receive the right to a greater quantity of the social product than the lazy, the careless, and the disorganizers. It was his opinion that everything must be done to assist the development of rivalry in the sphere of production. I mean, I'm fine with that. I just don't call it socialism, dude. Of course, all of this was conceived as the socialist principle of the transformation period. Right? This is just hey, they're under siege. This is war communism, right? Of course. We can always be sympathetic. Of course, probably in a year, there'll be show trials and fucking Trump's going to have me dragged up on stand and I'll be accused of being a fucking Soviet sympathizer. And I'll say, I am, but I'm also a Nazi sympathizer. It's okay, guys. Come on.
No, look, man, you gotta take into account the context. You gotta understand where these guys are coming from. And we're joking, but also you do have to keep in mind where people are coming from. If you're gonna speak in absolutes and do this, I decree from down from on high that this is the fucking way forward. You're not living in the real world. You're not playing the game that we're trying to play. You are disconnected from necessity or distanced from necessity in this way that allows you to play with absolutes and allows you to fucking disregard and forego context to just make grand proclamations. That's why that's one of the reasons I'm so stoked about this upcoming fucking political philosophy course with Studebaker, because I don't like politics. I fucking hate thinking about politics because I do feel like it's a dead end. I do feel like it's worthless. But to be able to rigorously think about this shit with someone I trust, and actually think through it, for me, that's I can be a little more hopeful and a little more, not optimistic, but a little more realistic when it comes to thinking about politics, because there are no actually existing solutions. So it is up to somebody who's around right now to fucking get a wild hair up their ass and come up with something that actually works. And you have to think about it. I don't think about it. I'm lucky enough that I can just say, I don't care about that shit. I care more about this disconnected theory, but we can't call ourselves theorists if we're not actually willing to engage with these hard problems. So I'm excited.
Right.
I'm super stoked.
Right. Ian in the chat said, and he just endorsed Biden before he dropped. Who did? Ian said
Bernie endorsed Biden?
It was either.
I'm not surprised.
Either Bernie did. Yeah, it was probably Bernie. Yeah. Well, I mean, what is that even like? Whenever people bring Bernie up, I'm like, who? What are you talking about? Why are you even talking?
I mean,
about this?
it's cute and it's nostalgic and it does bring back some feeling. 2015, 2016. Like there was something in the air.
Yeah.
But it was a fart. And we got to stop smelling that fart. It might smell kind of good. I don't know about you, but sometimes farts, they smell weirdly good. It's like, oh, that's funky, but it's something pleasing about it.
Yeah,
Turn the
Bernie's like
fan
one
on,
of
dude.
Bernie's one of those farts where you're like, oh, that's pretty nice actually, and then other people are like, "Ugh," and you're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, you guys are
Oh, yeah,
right.
yeah,
That is nasty. Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah.
Never mind. Never mind.
Ian confirmed it was Bernie he was talking about.
Yeah.
Of
Fuck,
course,
dude.
of course, all this was conceived as the socialist principle of the transformation period. It was dictated by objective difficulties in the way of full socialization. There was not the desire, but the need to strengthen party dictatorship until it led to the abolishment of even those freedoms of activity which, in one fashion or another, had been granted by the bourgeois state. However, Stalin too can offer the excuse of necessity. Right? Stalin totally can say, well, necessity. In order to, I mean, really, and like the same with socialism in one country. This is totally justified by necessity. I mean, as soon as you start making those kind of capitulations, sure, fucking fine, sure, but just don't act like the theory is the same. In order to find in order to find other arguments against Stalinism than his personal dislike for a competitor in intra-party struggles, Trotsky must discover and construct political differences between himself and Stalin, and between Stalin and Lenin, in order to support his assertion that without Stalin, things would have been different in Russia and elsewhere. There could not have been any theoretical differences between Lenin and Stalin, as the only theoretical work bearing the name of the latter had been inspired and supervised by Lenin. And if Stalin's nature craved the centralized party machine, he puts nature craved in quotes because that's the way that Trotsky would talk about it. If Stalin's nature craved the centralized party machine, it was Lenin who constructed the perfect machine for him, so that on that score too, no differences could arise. In fact, as long as Lenin was active, Stalin was no trouble to him, however troublesome he may have been to the number 2 Bolshevik. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of like underline nature craved. And then every time we get some quote from Trotsky that describes Stalin in these ways that are trying to tell us what his inner motivations were or why he was just a really, really bad guy at the level of his psyche or soul, I'm going to go ahead and underline that stuff so we can throw it back at every Trotskyist who tries to act like any talking of psychoanalysis is idealism because we're not talking about material conditions. Shut the fuck up. Still, in order for Trotsky to explain the Soviet thermidor, there must be a difference between Leninism and Stalinism, provided, of course, there was such a thermidor. On this point, Trotsky has brought forth various ideas as to when it took place, but in his Stalin biography, he ignores the question of time in favor of the simple statement that it had something to do with the increasing privileges for the bureaucracy, which, by the way, is justified by the thing that he said on the previous page about how some people just deserve more because they work harder. Which, okay, the quote was, those workers who do more for the general interests than others receive the right to a greater quantity of the social product than the lazy, the careless, and the disorganizers. Well, it's really easy for a bureaucrat to show how what they're doing is necessary for the public interest and therefore to justify their increase in privileges. But at least he's aware of it and admits that the increasing privileges for the bureaucracy was an issue. Most notably, I would point out that when the Soviets took over, specifically the Bolsheviks, they got to post up in the where the aristocracy prior to them, like the monarchy actually had been posted up, like the court grounds and the old bougie buildings and all of like the super nice royal palace and like all of the accommodations, whatever, amenities, all of that stuff was what they found themselves instantly occupying. And those are not just material conditions. Those also come with symbolic weight, right? Like the symbolic weight of the old czarist regime was something they suddenly found themselves as bureaucrats occupying. It's kind of hard to change the structure of society when the new bureaucracy is literally living in the same beautiful, epic, and removed kind of conditions.
Yeah, man, and kind of clinging to the long dead fucking people, but keeping the symbolic fucking institutions alive by, oh, it's like, oh, you're the first among equals. Yeah, we're all equal, we're all comrades here, but I'm gonna go post up in the SARS palace. You're gonna go fucking starve while you farm potatoes and shit. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
or where
And
you can't farm potatoes because there aren't any.
Dig Dug in the chat just said, I was briefly intra introt intoxicated,
Intoxicated,
like
but I'm
Trotsky,
in
but
Hey,
intoxicated,
I feel you,
intoxicated.
man.
But
I
I'm
thought
in
I was a trot for a while too, man. It's
he said
okay.
he said I'm in recovery now. I was in a Marxist org where all the people that I really had a great time hanging out with most of the time, they were trots. If they showed their cards, they were trots. But the thing is like the people they were trying to bring left were usually Stalinoids, were usually third worldists, were usually hyper progressive activists on campus. They weren't trying to communicate with regular people, and they definitely weren't trying to develop okay, actually no. I'd say they bent over backwards to develop a program that could resonate with regular people, but because they spend so much time having like this double speak conversation with Stalinoids and third worldists, that it was all a ruse, That
Yeah.
they're like, how do we make this sound palatable to Americans? And it's like, yeah, but your agenda was prefigured by people who were doing national resistance, national oppression, resistance, liberation movement bullshit from like 100 years ago. Could we, all right, just whatever. Still, in order for Trotsky to explain the Soviet thermidor, there must be a difference between Leninism and Stalinism, provided, of course, there was such a thermidor. On this point, Trotsky has brought forth various ideas as to when it took place, but in his Stalin biography, he ignores the question of time in favor of the simple statement that it had something to do with the increasing privileges of the bureaucracy. I know I'm rereading, but that's good. However, this only brings us back to the early period of the Bolshevik dictatorship, which found Lenin and Trotsky engaged in creating the state bureaucracy and increasing its efficiency by increasing its privileges. Take it away for a couple pages there, man.
Competitors for power. The fact that the relentless struggle for position came into the open only after Lenin's death suggests something other than the Soviet thermidor. It simply indicates that by the time the Bolshevik state was of sufficient strength, or was in a position to disregard to a certain degree both the Russian masses and the international bourgeoisie, the developing bureaucracy began to feel sure that Russia was theirs for keeps. The fight for the plums of the revolution entered its more general and more serious stage. All adversaries in this struggle stressed the need of dictatorship in view of the unsolved internal frictions between workers and peasants, the economic and technological backwardness of the country as a whole, and the constant danger of attack from the outside. But within the setting of dictatorship, all sorts of arguments could be raised. The power struggle within the developing ruling class expressed itself in policy proposals either for or against the interests of the peasants, either for or against the limitation of factory councils, either for or against an offensive policy on the international front. High-sounding theories were expounded with regard to the estimation of the peasantry, the relationship between bureaucracy and revolution, the question of party generations, etc., and reached their climax in the Trotsky-Stalin controversy on the permanent revolution and the theory of socialism in one country. It is quite possible that the debaters believed their own phrases, yet, despite their theoretical differentiations, whenever they acted upon a real situation, they all acted alike. So it's like people who uh in like American evangelical Christianity, there's people who like freak out over like the interpretation of of one particular line from like the book of Acts, and it's like Acts 6 versus Acts 11. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but they're like, it's like the interpretation of like one word, and they're like, no, it actually means like, I don't know, I don't remember, but like it's fucking crazy. And these people hate each other, and they would go to war if they were in a different context. They would be in the streets killing each other. The
Yeah.
hatred runs that deep. But then they turn around and do functionally from the outside the exact same shit. They act exactly the same. They like, it's all the same shit. And over here, we're all weirdos. We're left, we're radical, we're progressive, whatever. We can laugh at it and we can see like, oh, that's absurd. But then we want to turn around and be like, I'm a Stalinist, I'm a Trot, I'm a Maoist, I'm a third worldist, I'm a this. And it's like, no, you guys are just as fucking absurd. And also you're equally ineffective. You're just role playing. And you think you're out here like saving the world based on the interpretation of this like one verse.
Right.
But
No,
but it's not, and it's silly.
Dude, the historic failures of the left that we have to tarry with and get reconciled with and learn from. It all comes down to Stalin was just a deeply bad person. and the bureaucracy was corrupt. And we interpret this one thing this way, and actually they interpreted it that way. And so there you go, man. That's why it didn't work out. But don't worry, we got the solution. Listen to us. We've got it. It's like,
that's okay, it.
Cool, guys.
Yeah, man.
Wow. I'm learning a lot today. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it sucks, dude. Like I do empathize with that. And I'm creating a fucking, a pastiche of these people. And I empathize with that pastiche. It's like, oh, you're young, you're passionate, you care, you realize things are fucked up, and you wish things could change. But then you're like, no, this is it. This is the truth. We have the truth. Like we've seen that. We've seen people stand up and say, we have the truth. And I'm going to just disregard the world as it actually is in favor of my personal interpretation of this backlog of text and history and historical content and everything. And it sucks, dude. It's like, you're making the problem worse for everybody by being this obstreperous fucking, like, from the outside, just like caustic person. But I understand, like, oh, it's fueled by passion. It's fueled by compassion. I get it. But like, sit down, dude. Sit down. Shut up. Learn a little bit.
No, but I don't think that Gabriel Rockhill or Daniel Tutt are caustic, though, right? We got to think about guys like that when we're thinking about like this standard worldview Marxist thing. Like guys like over at the Midwestern Marxist Institute and those kinds of people are like, they might be these more naive, like duped kind of true believer people, but people like Rockhill and Tutt, like, and how they capitulate to like Hawes's audience, and they capitulate to the Midwestern Marxist tendencies, and they capitulate to like the tanky tendencies within the DSA, or the tendencies that have left the DS. Well, the only reason they're doing that is because they literally believe it. I mean, I do not think that I don't think that we're dealing with, and they're not caustic. They're so, I'll be more like with like he's such like a, hey, can we all get along? Like very nice guy, very nice guy, very like, oh, can we all get along? At least publicly. Like publicly, it's like, can we all get along? But then of course, like, let's not have a conversation if you fundamentally disagree with where I'm coming from. I'm mainly going to just talk to people who will look up to me as their daddy. Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's the bigger issue. It's like, they're actually really nice people. They're like, it's very endearing to hear to hear them engage with other people. Like, I was just watching Gabriel Rockhill have a conversation, like platforming somebody, and I was just like, these people are great, man. I would probably learn a lot sitting in like a class with them teaching a history book. Absolutely. And that's part of what makes it so seductive, right? I'd say we're a lot more caustic than they are. In fact, I would say like we're a lot less palpable than they are, because I think we're more honest publicly. I think we're more honest about our feelings. Like they only do that shit in the DMs. We do it out here, and that's why some people are scared to engage because we're going to be honest. If that's crazy, if what you're saying is crazy, I'll be like, I think that's crazy. And then they'll be like, oh my God, let's just have that conversation in the back channels. You know, it's no, dude, I'm not having any more. I'm not having those conversations in the back channels. We're out here. If you can't have a conversation with me and my audience, I don't care, dude.
Yeah. No, it does. There are these people who, I don't know, I guess they're entrenched, man. Like they have their situation for whatever reason has ossified into whatever it is. And the people who lose out the most are the young, passionate people.
I've got to run downstairs. I'm listening to you though. All right, you
okay.
Take it away.
Yeah, I feel bad for young radicals because I feel like they're being taken advantage of, and then ultimately they get entrenched in their careers, and then they become these institutional figures themselves, and that sucks because everybody loses. Let's get back to it. It is quite possible that the debaters believed their own phrases, yet despite their theoretical differentiations, whenever they acted upon a real situation, they all acted alike. In order to suit their own needs, they naturally expressed identical things in different terms. If Trotsky rushes to the front, to all fronts in fact, he merely defends the fatherland. But Stalin is attracted by the front because here, for the first time, he could work with the most finished of all the administrative machines, the military machine. That is a quote. For which, by the way, Trotsky claims all credit. If Trotsky pleads for discipline, he shows his iron hand. If Stalin does the same, he deals with the heavy hand. If Trotsky's bloody suppression of the Kronstadt rebellion was a tragic necessity, Stalin's suppression of the Gregorian independence movement is in the manner of a great Russian Russifier, riding roughshod over the rights of his own people as a nation, again in quotes. And vice versa, suggestions made by Trotsky are called false and counter-revolutionary by Stalin's henchmen. When carried out under Stalin's auspices, they become additional proof of the great leader's wisdom. Yeah, man, this sounds exactly like your favorite leftist talking head or writer or thinker or content creator. Like it's all the same. There's functionally no difference between what's being done, yet there are claims that like the entire future of the world rests on my personal brand of whatever the fuck it is.
Right.
And it's like, I don't know. It's just so silly. It's gross. Dude, it's sad.
Well, and here's the thing: is like, look at like he's using quotes here. I want to track it down. I want to track it down to the actual biography, but it's like, yeah, Trotsky's like, oh, he's pleading for discipline, so he's showing his iron hand. Stalin does the exact same thing, but no, he's dealing with a heavy hand. And it's like, yeah, it's like, oh, you know, I go to the front to defend the country, but he's rushing to the front because he's just eager to get embroiled in pointless battles. It's just like, it's like, I don't know. I think Kolakowski's also really good on this. He also has like this litany of comparisons between Stalin and Trotsky where he's showing the exact same thing. So it's like, I don't know if it was Maddock or Kolakowski who first kind of like realized it or if everybody was already aware of it, but like I wasn't aware of it. Nobody in my educational upbringing was ever like, it's always like there's these, it's either they're all just communists, they're Satanists, you know, which is like this kind of conservative standpoint. But from the left, it's like, oh yeah, no, well, Trotsky was trying to do something different. Or, you get all of these various ways of maybe they are the same or maybe they're different, but nobody comes in like Maddock or Kolakowski and actually shows like, look at what's happening at the level of interpretation in psychology. And that's what this whole section is as well. It's taking the exact same thing and then just saying, well, because Trotsky was doing it, this is the meaning of that. And because Stalin was doing it, here's the meaning of that. And so it's psychologizing interpretation. Yeah, that's all it is. And so it gets circled the same way as on the previous page when it said like, you know, Stalin's nature craved, the centralized party machine.
Dude, yeah. And like I was for a while. I was like, yeah, man, like if only if only we would have got Trotsky. Like I was that guy who was like things would have worked out. Um but now like it's like I can just imagine like I don't know, this is like an online beef between like Vosh and Hassan. Like in my mind it's the same level of like
Yeah.
Amazing.
but
I got to show you this added sound clip. Actually, I just added this one very recently. Listen.
Based on science, we never know what's going on the outside of the world.
Based on science, we never know what's going on the outside world. This was this is a clip from a dad who was being asked on TV back in the 70s or 80s or whatever, like, do you regret taking your son to see this R-rated movie Alien? And like the previous dad had just said that he did regret bringing him, and he's like, no, stuff like that can happen, but based on science, we never know what's going on the outside world.
sick, dude.
His little kid is just sitting there like, yeah.
I'm getting this motherfucker ready for when the aliens come, dude. I love Alien, dude. There's a new Alien movie coming out sometime soon.
I hope it's good and not like that Alien versus Predator movie. I just saw Godzilla's minus
Gojira?
one. Dude, that shit was fucking
Godzilla
awesome.
Godzilla -1.
Yeah, dude.
Dude, is that good?
So good. It was so good.
Was it?
Mikey and Bert kept rewatching it, and both kept telling me I had to go see it. So I finally watched it. Yeah, dude. No, it's like an art film. Like it's its own category. You gotta treat it like it's like Joaquin's Joker. You know what I mean? It's like this other.
Yeah.
It's like this other thing. Yeah.
Okay, now I do have to watch it.
Yeah, dude. No, that's something to look forward to. It's a great time. I instantly rewatched it with Ann. So that's how you know. That's how you know. By the way, it's great to see Wukas in the chat, who said, "Damn, Nance, good to see you, man."
Whoa. Yeah, man. I'll hit you up. It was good hanging out with you and shit. Showing us around the city.
Yeah, dude. I'll be publishing that soon. All of our readings of Baudrillard we were doing together.
I was dreaming about that shawarma or kebab or whatever it was, that little place that we had.
Oh yeah.
In the Jewish quarter.
Yeah.
Remember that place? Yeah, I actually dreamed about that a couple nights ago. It was really good.
That's cool. All right, now I'm gonna go eat a burrito downstairs while I listen to you read to me like a baby getting read a lullaby before bed. It's gonna be amazing. All right.
This would be a horrible fucking good night story, dude. To understand Bolshevism, and in a narrower sense, Stalinism, it is not enough to follow the superficial and often silly controversies between Stalinists and Trotskyites. After all, the Russian Revolution embraces more than just the Bolshevik Party. It was not even initiated by organized political groups, but by spontaneous reactions of the masses to the breakdown of an already precarious economic system in the wake of military defeat. The February upheavals started with hunger riots in marketplaces, protest strikes in factories, and the spontaneous declaration of solidarity with the rioters on the part of the soldiers. But all spontaneous movements in modern history have been accompanied by organized forces. As soon as the collapse of Tsarism was imminent, organizations came to the fore with directives and definite political goals. If, prior to the revolution, Lenin had stressed organization rather than spontaneity, it was because of the retarded Russian conditions, which gave the spontaneous movements a backward character. Just a note on the text, retarded here should be taken to mean slowed down or like lessened, their intensity lessened, slowed down. Matic is not being an edgelord here, just in case anyone is watching. Retarded means slowed down. So anyway, even the politically advanced groups offered only limited programs. The industrial workers desired capitalistic reforms similar to those enjoyed by the workers in more capitalistically advanced countries. The petty bourgeoisie and important layers of the capitalist class wanted a Western bourgeois democracy. The peasants desired land and a capitalist agriculture. Though progressive for Tsarist Russia, these demands were of the essence of the bourgeois revolution. The new liberalistic February government attempted to continue the war, but it was the conditions of war against which the masses were rebelling. All promised reforms within the Russian setting of that time and within the existing imperialistic power relationships were doomed to remain empty phrases. There was no way of directing the spontaneous movements into those channels desired by the government. In new upsurges, the Bolsheviks came into power not by way of a second revolution, but by a forced change of government. This seizure of power was made easy by the lack of interest that the restless masses were showing in the existing government. The October coup, as Lenin said, was easier than lifting a feather. The final victory was practically achieved by default. Not a single regiment rose to defend Russian democracy. The struggle for supreme power over an empire that comprised 1/6 of the terrestrial globe was decided between amazingly small forces on both sides in the provinces as well as in the two capital cities. The Bolsheviks did not try to restore the old conditions in order to reform them, but declared themselves in favor of the concrete results of the conceptually backward spontaneous movements, the ending of the war, the workers' control of industry, the expropriation of the ruling classes, and the division of land. And so they stayed in power. The pre-revolutionary demands of the Russian masses had been backward for two reasons. They had long been realized in the main capitalist nations, and they could no longer be realized in view of existing world conditions. At a time when the concentration and centralization process of world capitalism had brought about the decline of bourgeois democracy almost everywhere, it was no longer possible to initiate it afresh in Russia. If laissez-faire democracy was out of the question, so were all those reforms in capital-labor relations, usually related to social legislation and trade unionism. Capitalist agriculture, too, had passed beyond the breaking up of feudal estates and production for a capitalist market to the industrialization of agriculture and its consequent incorporation into the concentration process of capital. So the world, the ground, the context that all this stuff took place, it was a time of transition, right? The world wars, the turn of the century, the impacts of the industrial revolution, advancements in not just like manufacturing and distribution, but also social technologies and like governmental technologies as well. Like all this shit was happening in response to the upheaval. And there's actually a lot of really interesting stuff about World War I. I feel like people like World War II is kind of the darling of history enjoyers. I feel like World War I is really interesting because it's kind of the culmination of a lot of the forces that gave rise to what's going on here, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks and socialism and industrialization and capitalism and like all this stuff. Which is why it's important to talk about the context, which is why it is important to say, yeah, maybe what they were doing sucked. Like maybe Leninism sucked. Maybe like it was always going to be that way. Maybe it's not about like, oh, if only this had happened rather than that, playing the what if game. Like maybe it just sucked. But also maybe like they were doing what they thought they had to do. And actually, reading, what's the goddamn guy, dude? Not Virilio. Why the hell did I think Virilio? Because the guy has a weird name. It's not weird, but I can never remember how to say it. When we read Heidegger and Ruins, Richard Bolin. He spent some time kind of laying out the context with what was going on in Germany and how people took advantage of the dejected kind of German spirit at the time in the wake of World War One, and how that led to like nationalism being seen as a good idea for a lot of people. Like a lot of people saw it as a good idea because they were living in a ruined country with no economy, and it was like, fuck, we're fucked. We need to do something. Like that is true. And that's not apologizing for nationalism or Nazism. It's just saying like this is why it happened. This is how so many people wound up thinking, hey, it's a good idea. It's also important to think about like, well, this is how Bolshevism kind of happened. This is how so many people wound up thinking it was a good idea. And now looking back, like I've spent in my life like a lot of time thinking about the romance of the October Revolution and 1917. Like it's all very romantic from at least my position, or it can be. And it like no, it never was that. Like it never was this like glorious movement of like we are going to liberate the world and save the world from capital, and it never was that. It was always a shitty response to an even shittier situation. And I don't know, just focusing on like, no, if it would have been Trotsky rather than Stalin, things would have worked out, and doing this. And Lenin was actually a really good guy and he had horrible situations and blah, 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 blah. No, it's okay to just be like, yeah, they made shitty choices, but they were starting from shitty conditions.
That's where
What's so wrong with that?
That's where I think Catrone is going to come at it from. Instead of this like hero worship kind of thing. But that hero worship and that romanticizing the thing is, I think, what China Melville's doing in Red October. Dig Dug in chat said China Melville's book on the Bolshevik Revolution was very readable. Yep, so is evangelical apologetics literature, right? Like, so is anything that's trying to just confirm a bunch of your biases. And that is like very much like this rosy-eyed, or rosy lensed. How does that kind of view of the situation? I wonder if Wukas's recommendation is any better. He said, if someone after this would be interested in learning about the entirety of Russian Revolution, then the Revolutions podcast has a great series on it. Listen to the whole thing, and it's dope. So does it have like this this kind of approach that Nance is describing, this like this approach that's not apologetics, that it's just like, hey, it's not all good, it's not all bad, it's just let's just look at it and say it is what it is, and what happened, like let's just do that, instead of like this sort of Michael Parenti sort of like, obviously he goes a lot further in the side of like instead of just being like, hey, we can't blame people who were on board with Bolshevism, which would be like, I would call that sympathetic. But instead he goes into that was the right side of history. They fucking almost won. Not only did they almost win, bitch, it ain't over. We're going to keep fighting the fight using the same old kind of ideas. And, that's the direction that it goes in.
Yeah, man. And I do think there is value. Like we don't want to be history enjoyers. We all know that there are those people who they just enjoy the history. They enjoy the imagery. They enjoy the, hero worship. We don't want to do that, but I do think it is worth learning the history of all this shit. Especially because it seems like we are living through another period of intense optimization of technologies, social technologies, manufacturing technologies, distribution technologies. Like nothing's really changing. It's all the same shit, but things are being iterated on at like alarming speed today. Like we're living through the technological revolution. I think they were also living through a time of technological revolution. I think it's worth, I don't know. It's worth learning about but you don't want to become a history enjoyer. You also don't want to become like a two-dimensional thinker where it's all good, it's all bad. Like, no, these were people. These were people. That's why it's funny that like these guys were beefing the same way today streamers beef. Like Trots and Stalinists are going to beef the same way that Foch fans and Hassan fans beef online. Like, they're people. They have hopes and dreams. They have bills. They have regrets. They have friendships. Like, no, these are fully fleshed out, like fully dimensional people. Yeah, they do dumb shit. Yeah, they do cool shit. But to just come down on the side of being like, this is the truth, this is the way forward, or these guys are absolute wrong. I don't know, just like that's what we tend to do with all historical things. We
Yeah,
should resist that.
and I guess because someone could pretty easily clip today and get me to say that I am a Nazi sympathizer, I better clarify what I meant. Really, I kind of realized I was like downstairs eating my burrito, and I was like, I better clarify what fuck, that could be. Look, at the end of the day, I don't give a shit if you guys, or not you guys, but like if someone else happened to come in just to pull that quote, because I'm not trying to make those kinds of people happy. The kinds of people who are easily convinced by things clipped out of context, are the kinds of people who are like, oh, Nina's a Nazi. You know, and it's just, I don't care. I don't care about you guys. You're idiots. But I will tell you all what I meant though. And what I mean is if you do the Being in Time course, when I teach it, I am incredibly sympathetic to people who were disillusioned with liberalism and communism and were looking for a genuine way forward that doesn't throw out tradition and that doesn't throw out borders and that is able to actually lend the strength and courage necessary for defending one's country from invaders. Like the 1920s was a dark time. There were a lot of communists who were and social democrats who were fucking crazy, who thought, oh yeah, nope, we're there, we're ready. And someone like Heidegger is over here like, no, that ain't it. That's some bullshit. And so he's looking for something else, right? Bourdieu, in his book on the political ontology of Martin Heidegger, Bourdieu's like, yeah, Heidegger thought that the Soviets were no different than capitalism. It's just instead of capitalism run by capitalists, it's capitalism run by workers. And I was like, that's actually true, Bourdieu. Why you say that like it's bad? And not only like, I'm sorry, it takes an asshole conservative sometimes to come out and just say the thing and being like, ooh, look, he said that, and then he became a Nazi later. See the connection? I hate this reductio ad like Nazi like move where it's like,
yeah,
it's like, oh, you know what? You know who also said that thing? These people also said that thing. Therefore, this thing, saying it, means that you'll end up doing what those people did. It's like, that's not true. There's like no reason to believe that. We can actually look at the situation they were in, and then we could talk about why maybe they were duped by the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and that is what I'm calling sympathizing. Because I believe in playing the believing game and trying to be sympathetic in order to get inside of a worldview, to get inside of a thinker's head, to be able, but that's just part of the dialectical process. You're supposed to go beyond that at some point, but you're not supposed to rush past that point. But that's different than like doing apologetics for the Soviet Union as a lifestyle, as a whole career, or doing Nazi apologetics as a career, which is, I mean, essentially what someone like Nick Fuentes is doing, right? So I'm not for that shit. Yeah.
Have you seen Paper Mario? It's a video game where it's like you're Mario, but for some reason you're like a piece of paper, and like I don't know, it's fucking stupid. But like that's the world. I know, I haven't played it. I've seen it, and
I've not.
My nephew's played it, and I'm like, oh, that looks cool, but weird. I don't understand it. But look, whatever. So they took Mario. Who's Mario? It's me, Mario, and he's a three-dimensional character, and he does shit, and he lives in the world, and blah blah blah. And then they flatten him out to a piece of paper, and it goes back to the old school Mario, where you only have 2 degrees of freedom. like horizontal and vertical. You
Which
can't.
is the best. That's
It,
the best.
well, it's dope, but like that's what happens in these I don't know, these buffs, these enjoyers of this historical stuff, or even like politics enjoyers. Like everything is flattened down. You don't have degrees of freedom to actually move and think and be like a living, robust subject. It's like you're either left or you're either right,
Right.
or you're either right or you're either wrong. Like in it sucks, dude, because there's a lot of, I guess, intermingling with these types of buffs or enjoyers and people who take this shit seriously. And it sometimes becomes difficult to like even know who you're really dealing with. Like, no, we're trying to really think. We're trying to really theorize. We're trying to really get somewhere to free up some degrees of freedom, some degrees of movement. We're not just here to enjoy it.
And this,
but there's
doing that to do theory for real though does require being like, oh, emancipatory movements for the last 150 to 200 years have been fucked and keep failing, and there are very expectations, assumptions, values might either be wrong or need adjustment. The concepts might be wrong. The territory of the map could have been misunderstood. The map itself definitely needs an upgrade. All of these different kinds of realizations are the only way to unlock theory, but also to do it, you do have to be sympathetic to the actual situations that people are writing in. And that's how the so-called postmodernists were unlocked for me. That's why Levinas is so much more than just an ethical thinker or whatever. It's like, no, why he matters is because you cannot read him without realizing that he is critiquing the dominant political tendencies of the moment, being both National Socialism and historical and dialectical materialism as totalizing narratives. And that you can't get anything out of Baudrillard or Lyotard or Levinas without understanding that they were in a context where, by not being Marxists, like there were people who wanted to kill them in Paris at the time.
Yeah, dude.
That they were being brave. Like Lyotard will like later call Libidinal Economy his evil book because he got so much flack for it. Well, it wasn't evil, it was brash. But it's not something that leftists were able to sit with, that they were able to tarry with and think through the contradictions of, like the problems that it actually poses for their, no, they couldn't do that. So we'll just call it all postmodernism and move on. Look at the CIA's not threatened by it. Yeah, well, that's because Lyotard isn't informing cadres that are going to infiltrate every existing political organization and undermine it from within, as Marxists were doing at the time. So of course the CIA doesn't give a fuck about it. Not that they were able to understand it. They lack the. I like, it's almost like one of the prerequisites, which would be for us, we did believe in this shit, and we still, in a sort of sense, there's still something there that we do want to salvage. And if there's not something there that you ultimately want to salvage, then yeah, any approach to history is going to be, well, which side would I have been on? And then acting like nothing ever really changes and everything's just repeating itself. Because of course, it's very easy to do that when you skip something like Marshall McLuhan and you just say, oh, he's just a bourgeois thinker, like Doug Lane did when we were in Portland with him. Love Doug, but acting like you don't have to take McLuhan seriously because he's just a bourgeois thinker. It's like, dude, well, if you're not doing media theory in the 21st century, man, you're not doing theory.
Yeah.
And he should know that because he's into the situationists. So I don't know. Anyway, I'll start reading. The Bolsheviks and mass spontaneity. The Bolsheviks did not claim responsibility for the revolution. They gave full credit to the spontaneous movements. Of course, they underlined the obvious fact that Russia's previous history, which included the Bolshevik Party, had lent some kind of vague revolutionary consciousness to the unorganized masses, and they were not backward about asserting that, without their leadership, the course of the revolution would have been different and most probably would have led to a counter-revolution. Quote, had the Bolsheviks not seized power, writes Trotsky, the world would have had a Russian name for fascism 5 years before the March on Rome. But counter-revolutionary attempts on the part of the traditional powers failed not because of any conscious direction of the spontaneous movements, not because of Lenin's sharp eyes which surveyed the situation correctly, but because of the fact that these movements could not be diverted from their own course. If one wants to use the term at all, the counter-revolution possible in the Russia of 1917 was that inherent in the revolution itself, that is, in the opportunity it offered the Bolsheviks to restore a centrally directed social order for the perpetuation of the capitalistic divorce of the workers from the means of production and the consequent restoration of Russia as a competing imperialist power. And it's funny because like that's how Michael Parenti will start out. I think he starts out black shirts, brown shirts, or whatever.
Black shirts and reds. Black shirts and reds.
Thank you. Yeah, that's how he starts that out. Is like basically talking about how like the amazing gains in terms of the industrial development in Russia. And it's like you see the same thing with like Maoists. Like they always are like, oh yeah, but look, it went from like 0 to 80. Now they're like they moved centuries in development in such a short period of time. And it's like, yes, they did. That's
what's
great.
Crazy, dude. Like the way people talk about now about like the global South or the third world or the lean world, like whatever the fuck you want to call it.
The lean world? Nations. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, the lean versus fat. We like first world countries are fat, third world countries are lean.
Okay, it's not because they're like doing mumble rap and drinking lean.
Lean, or because they can't like they don't have proper engineers, so all their houses lean sideways. No.
Yeah.
But there are like India, parts of China, parts of Africa, especially Africa. Like people talk about they missed out on certain stages of development. And so like their development is going to be different. And it is actually going to be different. But there's a lot of talk about like how and why their development's going to be different, how it's going to affect the global economy, this and that. No one's asking like, should we go in and develop like, because it's not like an organic process where the people who already live there are trying to step up their game and join the fucking first world. Like it is like corporations are expanding into these new regions, and there's just so much discourse about like how is it going to be different, but no one's like should we just go and like hyper develop everything just for the fuck of it? Like is it necessarily a good thing that they took Russia from a backwards country to like an industrial world power? Is that a good thing? Like people always say, well, they did this. Like, yeah, they did. Why is that a good thing? I've never heard anybody tell me why that's a fucking good thing, other than to just like hypothetically be like, well, yeah, they killed, millions of Nazis in World War II. Like, yeah, but fascism fucking won World War II anyway. Like millions of people died. And that's sensational. That's sensational. I'm not saying fascism won World War II. I'm saying managerialism won World War II.
There is a good argument to be made that there is this this version of totalitarianism that's not so obvious that did win out because it's all like deep state shit, 100%. But this whole like disappearing people in broad daylight, that kind of shit did not win out, and that's the part that people are driven most crazy. As James Burnham said, what people really have a problem with is German fascism. They wouldn't have a problem with America. They wouldn't have a problem with American fascism.
Well, I think it would be more accurate to just say like, this managerial mode of capital won. The similarities between the Soviet countries or between the Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, and contemporary America, like the similarities that actually matter, that truly impact us, those won.
Yeah.
100%. But I mean, that's the sensational conversation and blah, blah, blah. But is it necessary? Like, is it good that they took Russia from a backward country to this world power? Is it good? I've never heard anyone say, yeah.
The only reason I think the answer would be yes is that if they didn't, then Nazis would have invaded and taken over.
For sure.
Right. Is it Nicholas II? Was he the Tsar that got displaced? He's the last proper Tsar.
Tsar Nicholas.
Yeah. And so old Nick, he was not, he was like Biden at the, right now. Like he he was not doing so hot, and so yeah, they had to come in there. And it would, if it hadn't have been them, it would have been Nazis. But like, as I think what Trotsky's trying to say in this piece is that, we would have had a word for fascism 5 years before the March on Rome. What he's saying is like, yeah, but if it hadn't been the Bolsheviks leading the charge, supposedly, which they weren't, if they hadn't co-opted the revolution, then it would have just been something fascist. It would have been somebody who was it would have been somebody whose only agenda was land back to the peasants and let's make Mother Russia great again, which in that case, I mean, in a sort of sense, like you would have had what Stalinism became later a lot sooner.
Yep. From the jump.
We're talking. Yeah. Like Lenin does add some complexity by trying to make it Marxist, even though the shoe doesn't fit.
Yeah. So Russia was primed for this transition. It was going to happen. I don't want to say like inevitably because that's a strong word, but it was happening due to the currents of capital, of global capital. The revolution was coming. The technological revolution was coming. So to have this social overlay was actually good. Okay, I accept that. But people don't say that.
Well, and I think that you'll definitely find Leninists who will say stuff like that. That is kind of like it. I in fact, I could think Swole would probably say that, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But the issue is that logic becomes this sort of legitimation for backing anything that's supposedly revolutionary, which is why you had all the Marxists stepping up during the 7 months of BLM protests and rioting. And they were like, yes, let us speak to them. Let us speak to the disaffected who are rioting. We will show them the way of dialectical materialism. And it's like, guys, this is funded by Goldman Sachs. Like, shut the fuck up. This is literally like rainbow corporatism encouraging people to riot in black neighborhoods and ruin the lives of small store owners for
small
what?
Businesses, man.
For what?
So that they can get cheap real estate for a remote office location. Fucking WeWork, CrowdStrike, all these fucking huge, like, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, yeah, it's that Leninist sort of idea that makes it so that people who are LARPing as Leninists still today try to co-opt or lead from behind like any movement. Yeah. And they'll go, look, the masses are more revolutionary than we are because we're just sitting here reading what must be done, but they're throwing bricks through windows. So it's like, it's almost like the tankies tail the anarchists.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. During the revolution, the interests of the rebelling masses and of the Bolsheviks merged to a remarkable degree. Beyond the temporary merger, there also existed a deep unity between the socializing concepts of the Bolsheviks and the consequences of the spontaneous movements, too backward for socialism, but also too advanced for liberal capitalism. The revolution could end only in that consistent form of capitalism which the Bolsheviks considered a precondition of socialism, namely state capitalism. By identifying themselves with the spontaneous movement they could not control, the Bolsheviks gained control over this movement as soon as it had spent itself in the realization of its immediate goals. There were many such goals, differently reached in different territories. Various layers of the peasantry satisfied or failed to satisfy divergent needs and desires. Their interests, however, had no real connection with those of the proletariat. The working class itself was split into various groups with a variety of specific needs and general plans. The petty bourgeoisie had still other problems to solve. In brief, there was a spontaneous unity against the conditions of Tsarism and war, but there was no unity in regard to immediate goals and future policy. That's an important line right there. Everyone was against Tsarism and war, but everyone was divided on immediate goals and future policy, which obviously would only come from a diagnosis of the situation that is actually clear-headed and not trying to copy-paste Marx's ideas from a different century or different country into the current moment. And then, we will make this shoe fit. Here, let's just cut a couple toes off. Sorry, comrade.
Yeah.
Right? Like the other groups which asserted themselves within the revolution, the Bolsheviks too pressed forward. No, I didn't actually finish the last
You
paragraph.
finished finish that paragraph.
It was not too difficult for the Bolsheviks to utilize this social division for building up their own power, which finally became stronger than the whole of society because it never faced society as a whole. Like the other groups which asserted themselves within the revolution, the Bolsheviks too pressed forward to gain their particular end, the control of government. This goal reached farther than those aspired to by others. It involved a near-ending struggle. It involved a never-ending struggle, a continuous winning and re-winning of power positions. Peasant groups settled down after dividing the land. Workers returned to the factories as wage laborers. Soldiers, unable to roam the countryside forever, returned to the life of peasant and worker. But for the Bolsheviks, the struggle only really began with the success of the revolution. Like all governments, dude, that's such a beautiful sentence. I just want to highlight, I never do this, like, let's focus on the grammar of what's going on. But I do want to just point that I love long sentences when they work. Okay? And watch what this one does. It says, it involved a never-ending struggle, a continuous winning and re-winning of power positions. Okay, great sentence. Peasant groups settled down after dividing the land. Workers returned to the factories as wage laborers. Soldiers, unable to roam the countryside forever, returned to the life of peasant and worker, but for the Bolsheviks, the struggle only really began with the success of the revolution. Now, in some cases, some people would have put that extra information about the soldiers within parentheses. It would have said soldiers, in parentheses, unable to roam the countryside forever, return to the life of peasant and worker. Nowadays, it's more likely that that would be in a footnote, because everything says, no, you can't have compound sentences. You can't, because, like, think about it. He's doing a list, and then he does a whole aside about one of the list items within the list without using parentheses, footnotes, or anything. And guess what? If your brain can't follow that, you're not literate. You're not fucking literate. And that's not a dunk on you. It's a dunk on the education system, guys.
On your schooling. Yeah. Not just your schooling, but also like the social idea of literacy itself. Like, are you literate? Can you pass this fucking exam?
Well, and think of, it's not even exams. Like, if I'm talking to you in a conversation and I have a complex idea that requires several movements, but it makes sense for it to all fit together just like that one did, and you lose me, that's about you, not about me. Now, it's very hard to say that in the underground, because there's a lot of people in the underground and they lose me and Mikey. Like, a lot of people when they're up and coming young bucks on Instagram or whatever, they got a lot of shit to say on streams about theory, but it's like, well, you're kind of not saying anything, guys. Well, it's in their defense, they are fighting to gain a literacy that they should have had in the first place, and they're doing it by reading the most difficult texts in the world. So of course, like, the cards are the deck is stacked against them. But with that said, it's like, so yes, of course we should learn how to write clearly, and you want to learn to use punchy sentences. But I am also saying, though, that, like, unapologetically, sometimes it's okay to write a longer sentence when it makes sense, and a footnote or a parentheses would have fucked that shit. It would have.
Yeah, man. And I think, like, I hate footnotes. I do. I think footnotes are great when it's like pertinent information that just totally disrupts the flow of the text. But yeah, man, like, I love run-on sentences. I love long compound fucking statements. And I think it's actually important to resist the fucking tendencies of contemporary fucking mediums, because everything is being pushed in this direction of short, punchy, clear, concise. We're losing the negativity. We're losing the ability to flow with one another and have a back and forth. If it's not a fucking 3-word slogan, sorry, dude. If it's not marketable, if it's not this, if it's not that, like, no, there is actually some praxis when we're talking about, like, how are we going to format our underground theory?
Yes.
It's important that we push back and we make it more, I don't know, artistic, if that's the word you need to use to describe it, but it's not. It's more human. It is more human. That is how humans fucking naturally conversate with one another. Like, imagine you're sitting around with your loved ones and you're having a conversation. There's back and forth and there's flow, and like there's these gaps, there's these lacunae of like, well, that might have been a little unclear. Maybe that, well, maybe it doesn't have to be clear. Maybe it doesn't have to be a finished product. Maybe it's a back and forth, a dialectical coming to understanding.
People are scared.
And that shit's unacceptable when it comes to proper content.
Yeah, people are scared to think out loud. So much so that they go and they pay somebody to sit there and observe them free associating, and it's like, dude, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that the class you live in, the stakes for your speech acts are so high that you censor yourself that much. But normal fucking people say whatever the fuck they want. And y'all, it's like the conversation of the material conditions of psychoanalysis and like its role in the relations of production, that does come up from time to time. But it's so funny to think about how like, there's only one class of people who are so worried about saying the wrong thing that they never actually say anything they genuinely mean. And that class can be understood by reading Pride and Prejudice. That's those people. That's those people. Psychoanalysis is for those people. And the people who are like trying to act like we should write like fucking neurotic academics who like have to pay a friend to listen to them talk honestly for once. It's like, cool guys.
What's that I think you should leave skit where you pay for your fucking friends?
Dude, that one is
modern psychoanalysts are just.
He's like, I have 200 friends. He's like, you don't have any friends. How would you like 200? He's like, Bobby, how many social functions did you go to this week? He's like, 3. He's like, and how many do you get at your current tier? 2. So why then, Bobby, were you? And he's like, well, it was at my house. And he's like, shh. Don't talk back to me, you know? Yeah. All right. Anybody who hasn't seen that skit should probably look it up. I think you should leave, just binge it. Like all governments, the Bolshevik regime involves submission of all existing social layers to its authority. Slowly centralizing all power and control into their hands, the Bolsheviks were soon able to dictate policy. Once more, Russia became thoroughly organized in the interests of a special class, the class of privilege in the emerging system of state capitalism. I think that everything Bourdieu is doing and its relevancy can only truly be understood if you get that sentence and ultimately everything that's going on in this book, right? Because he's not a Marxist. And then people are like, well, why is he talking about capital? Look, economic capital is what really matters. So that means social and cultural and social, cultural, symbolic, and political forms of capital. Those are all like, okay, now we're using this word capital too metaphorically. We can't really use that the way that Bourdieu wants to use it. And we could maybe use a different word. No. His point is that MCM prime isn't just a thing in the economy. It's a thing in you. That's his point. Yeah. His point is that you can fucking seize the means or seize the state, and the process of capital accumulation continues regardless of whether there's dollars being exchanged between people's hands or whether people go and clock in to be laborers. The point is that those pursuits, whether they be priestly, whether they be political, whether they be journalism, whatever it is, if it's supposed to come with some prestige because for some reason you think that it's not economic, that's where they get symbolic capital from it in the first place. Right? It's like the person who goes and lives in poverty and then gets held up because, wow, look at how amazing that person was when they were living in poverty. And it's like,
the young radical liberal college student who's like, oh, I'm going to go, instead of backpacking across Europe, they're like, oh, I'm going to go, live among the poor for a while so I can get this experience. So I can go back to my Fortune 500 fucking HR manager job and be better. Yeah, dude, the fetish of monetary value kind of obscures the process of capital accumulation itself.
100%.
Um, that's yeah, that's well, and then people like violently be like, oh no, sign value is not a sign values like that's not proper. That's not this. It's like, yeah, man, I don't know.
Yeah, no, what they're trying to get at, both Bourdieu and Baudrillard, is literally the issue right here. Now, of course, the issue expands and it happens in every managerial state, but it makes this distinction between capitalism is the managerial state makes a distinction between capitalism and socialism almost. It's not. It's nothing. Whether you take up a reformist, whether you take up a reformist or a revolutionary position, you're just going to be a part of this back and forth between neoliberalism and social democracy. Those are the only options on the table. And I mean, and Maddock is saying that this proves that in some sense. But you can take it away here for the next little bit because it's a new section. We'll just take turns section by section because there's lots of good sections here.
Yeah, man. The party machine. All this has nothing to do with Stalinism and Thermidor, but represents Lenin and Trotsky's policy from the very day they came to power. Reporting to the Sixth Congress of Soviets in 1918, Trotsky complained that not all Soviet workers have understood that our administration has been centralized and that all orders issued from above must be final. We shall be pitiless with those Soviet workers who have not yet understood. We will remove them with those Soviet workers who have not yet understood. We will remove them, cast them out of our ranks, pull them up with repressions. All one quote. Trotsky now claims that these words were aimed at Stalin, who did not coordinate his war activity properly and were willing to believe him. But how much more directly must they have been aimed at all those who were not even second rate, but had no rating at all in the Soviet hierarchy? There already existed, as Trotsky relates, a sharp cleavage between the classes in motion and the interests of the party machines. Even the Bolshevik party cadres. Yeah.
Quick little point. There's a maneuver that Maddock just made that is absolutely essential here. So I want to highlight it because it's like one of the big problems with cancel culture leftists today, where they go, oh, well, see, J.K. Rowling or Dave Chappelle, like we're talking about really, really rich and powerful people like Chappelle. I mean, he's a man, okay, and he's rich, and J.K. Rowling, she might be a woman, but you know, she's white and she's rich, and so like that privilege point makes it so that of course anything we want to do, any unfairness, any cruelty, any harassment, it's okay because they can hide in their mansion and fly over traffic and they don't have to come down to the plebes. And the point is yeah, but every regular worker sees that you think that treating them in that way is justified. And so every regular worker fucking hates you because most regular workers hold worse positions, worse. And by the way, I don't think there's anything evil about any of their positions, but you know,
no.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, it's a thing called common sense. And, you know, we should critique it, but as soon as you want the institutions to centralize or center the critique of common sense, that means you don't care about people trusting institutions anymore. And then, of course, they turn right around and say, well, people should trust the experts, trust the science. And it's like, you're literally the people who are justifying, like, barring people from public life on the basis of, like, their opinion about like whether they're for or against abortion or whether they're for or against whatever. It's just so stupid. And so,
well, and like hyper niche personal issues become like absolute political fucking statements that you must hold. That's fucking insane. That's insane that like, if you hold a personal view on something that, it doesn't fucking matter because it's not like you have the power to do violence on these people that you hate. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't do violence on these people and you probably don't hate them. You probably just have a fucking view on a thing because it makes you feel good or that thing makes you uncomfortable or whatever it is. And it is what it is. I disagree with my partner on big, important fucking issues. And we've managed to make it work. Like, why is it that if you hold a wrong opinion, people think it's okay to go on this crusade against
No,
you.
but
Well,
you
and
just,
we
no,
talked
but
about
you had the audacity to say it in public, and that causes harm. Oh my
sure,
God.
sure.
It's the harm reduction.
That's another one too,
Right.
man.
Yeah, dude.
Safety and harm and violence, like that's fucking. Come on, dude.
These words don't mean anything. But okay, can you highlight the middle where it says Trotsky now claims that these words were aimed at Stalin, who did not coordinate his war activity properly, and we are willing to believe him. This is a beautiful move on Maddox's part. He goes, yeah, let's believe him. But even if he's telling the truth, what is the functional effect that that kind of policy towards Stalin had? Well, he says, how much more directly must they have been aimed at all those who were not even second rate, but had no rating at all in the Soviet hierarchy? And that's exactly the point. That's exactly the point. Same shit today. Oh, well, we're just punching up. Yeah, well, funny, because every time you punch that person who's supposedly so high up, that person actually represents the egoic identifications of the fucking masses, you idiots.
Yeah. People have their sense of self tied up with these figures who you're calling fucking the worst people ever to live. And like, yeah, it's stupid, but don't act like you're not perpetrating harm on these fucking people as well, because you fucking are.
Tight, yeah.
Fucking.
There already existed, as Trotsky relates, a sharp cleavage between the classes in motion and the interests of the party machines. Even the Bolshevik party cadres, who enjoyed the benefit of exceptional revolutionary training, were definitely inclined to disregard the masses and to identify their own special interests with the interests of the machine on the very day after the monarchy was overthrown. Trotsky holds, of course, that the dangers implied in this situation were averted by Lenin's vigilance and by objective conditions which made the masses more revolutionary than the party, and the party more revolutionary than its machine. But the machine was headed by Lenin. Even before the revolution, Trotsky points out, the Central Committee of the party functioned almost regularly and was entirely in the hands of Lenin. And even more so after the revolution. In the spring of 1918, the ideal of democratic centralism suffered further reverses, for in effect, the power within both the government and the party became concentrated in the hands of Lenin and the immediate retinue of Bolshevik leaders who did not openly disagree with him and carried out his wishes. As the bureaucracy made headway nevertheless, the emerging Stalinist machine must have been the result of an oversight on the part of Lenin. To distinguish between the ruler of the machine and the machine on the one hand, and between the machine and the masses on the other, implies that only the masses and its top leader were truly revolutionary, and that both Lenin and the revolutionary masses were later betrayed by Stalin's machine, which, so to speak, made itself independent. Although Trotsky needs such distinctions to satisfy his own political interests, they have no basis in fact. Until his death, disregarding occasional remarks against the dangers of bureaucratization, which for the Bolsheviks are the equivalent of the bourgeois politicians' occasional crusades for a balanced budget, Lenin never once came out against the Bolshevik party machine and its leadership, that is, against himself. Whatever policy was decided upon received Lenin's blessing as long as he was at the helm of the machine, and he died holding that position. Lenin's democratic notions are legendary. Of course, state capitalism under Lenin was different from state capitalism under Stalin because the dictatorial powers of the latter were greater, thanks to Lenin's attempt to build up his own. That Lenin's rule was less terroristic than Stalin's is debatable. Like Stalin, Lenin cataloged all his victims under the heading counter-revolutionary. Without comparing the statistics of those tortured and killed under both regimes, we will admit that the Bolshevik regime under Lenin and Trotsky was not strong enough to carry through such Stalinist measures as enforced collectivization and slave labor camps as a main economic and political policy. It was not design but weakness which forced Lenin and Trotsky to the so-called new economic policy, that is, to concessions to private property interests and to a greater lip service to democracy. So that slippery slope right there, guys, and making excuses for horrible bad things, terrible, horrible, no good, very bad things, and
And they're
slippery
like,
slopes.
oh, it was all part of the plan all along. And it's like, do you fucking shut the fuck up, guys? We know that's not true.
Bolshevik toleration of such non-Bolshevik organizations as the Social Revolutionists in the early phase of Lenin's rule did not spring, as Trotsky asserts, from Lenin's democratic inclinations, but from inability to destroy all non-Bolshevik organizations at once. The totalitarian features of Lenin's Bolshevism were accumulating at the same rate at which its control and police power grew. That they were forced upon the Bolsheviks by the counter-revolutionary activity of all non-Bolshevik labor organizations, as Trotsky maintains, cannot, of course, explain their further increase after the crushing of the various nonconformist organizations. Neither could it explain Lenin's insistence upon the enforcement of totalitarian principles in the extra-Russian organizations of the Communist International.
Trotsky, apologist for Stalinism. Unable to blame non-Bolshevik organizations entirely for Lenin's dictatorship, Trotsky tells those theoreticians who attempt to prove that the present totalitarian regime of the USSR is due to the ugly nature of Bolshevism itself that they forget the years of civil war which laid an indelible impress on the Soviet government by virtue of the fact that very many of the administrators, a considerable layer of them, had become accustomed to command and demanded unconditional submission to their orders. Stalin, too, he continues, was molded by the environment and circumstances of the Civil War, along with the entire group that later helped him to establish his personal dictatorship. The Civil War, however, was initiated by the international bourgeoisie, and thus the ugly sides of Bolshevism under Lenin, as well as under Stalin, find their chief and final cause in capitalism's enmity to Bolshevism, which, if it is a monster, is only a reluctant monster, killing and torturing in mere self-defense.
Yikes, dude.
Yeah, man. No, dude, that's the pervert. You know, when Zizek talks about the perversion of the Stalinoids.
Yep.
Well, you know, we're a monster, but it's a monster of necessity. Oh yeah, you know, I'm doing something terrible to you right now, but listen, comrade, I'm a mere historical mechanism, as are you. We're just living out these processes. That's all it is. And so, if only in a roundabout way, Trotsky's Bolshevism, despite its saturation with hatred for Stalin, leads in the end merely to a defense of Stalinism as the only possible self-defense for Trotsky. This explains the superficiality of the ideological differences between Stalinism and Trotskyism. The impossibility of attacking Stalin without attacking Lenin helps to explain furthermore Trotsky's great difficulties as an oppositionist. Trotsky's own past and theories preclude on his part the initiation of a movement to the left of Stalinism and condemned Trotskyism to remain a mere collecting agency for unsuccessful Bolsheviks. Oh, damn.
Fuck, dude.
Little island of rejected Bolsheviks. As such, it could maintain itself outside of Russia. Yeah, that's the thing, dude. He's spitting bars. Like we gotta read this as like a sophisticated diss track because
for sure. Dude,
Maddock is no outsider. He is like as deep in the field as possible. Look up Paul Maddock on Marxist.org. They've got everything he's ever written. Like Marxist.org, it's like they've got so much shit from Paul Maddock, and he's got commentary on every little thing that was going on at the time. He was super involved. And so when he comes out with this shit, people are like, oh, fuck, you know?
Dude, it's recently the Kendrick and Drake beef is a thing that's going on in the media. And I personally don't give a shit. I don't like Kendrick. I don't like Drake. I love hip hop. I hate what it's become. But that's me being idealistic and leaning into the nostalgia. So whatever. But I think
you and Kendrick Lamar are like basically the same. You're just slightly different. But keep going.
So
I think you and Kendrick Lamar have more in common than he does with Barack Obama.
I mean, I
but
believe
I'm not.
it.
I don't mean in terms of class.
But-
I don't mean in terms of class. I mean in the sense that there's some authentic hip hop culture that you romanticize and nostalgize, and he thinks it's alive and well, and that's what he's doing right now. Yeah.
Well, and I'm perverted when it comes to my ideal version of hip hop, right? And that's why I react so strongly against him, because I recognize his greatness, and so I'm like, fuck that sucks. Anyway, blah blah blah. You and Mikey talked about that a lot, and I do actually think it's interesting, and I do want to see, I don't know, some interesting conversations emerge from that. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are into theory who are also into music. But no, like this is like the fucking Kendrick series of diss tracks on Drake. Like Matic is just dropping fucking bar after bar after bar.
It is.
Because he cares. Like the reason Kendrick can be so vitriolic against Drake is because Kendrick is invested in hip hop. Kendrick does care about the scene. Matic does care about emancipation. Matic does care about Marx's ideas, and that's why it's so spicy. And he can do that because he's got the fucking receipts.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. The Lenin, Trotsky, Stalin are definitely Drake in this scenario, and Matic is definitely Kendrick, because Kendrick is a true believer in this authentic black culture thing, and so is Matic. He's a believer in the authentic idea of communism. Like he's a real communist. He's just an anti-Bolshevik, and so it's like, for I'll always go back to saying, like, the best critiques to the left are always going to come from the left. It's always going to come from the person who is a true believer, not from some Candace Owens type. But you can't just copy paste them into our moment, because more than 50 years have passed since this was written. I think this was actually in the 30s, like the 1930s. So it's like almost 100 years since this shit was written. And yeah, he's writing this way ahead of like a lot of the shit that Stalin was doing coming out. So he's way ahead of his time here, and he's doing it as a principled communist. And the thing is at the time he thought that there was a genuine left alternative to Bolshevism. There wasn't. I mean, maybe there could have been, but that ship has sailed. That's the issue. Yeah, and then we could read Gore's the same way. Right? Like that's the thing is like most of these people who are new left thinkers, or who lend themselves to appropriations by the new left, or if they in some way influence the new left, they were never really read in this sort of post-left way that we're reading them, which is like the struggle, the more difficult thing is reading them that way. And I want to just say, like, for the new left, it was kind of obvious that constantly like trying to organize the workers wasn't going anywhere. It was constantly being co-opted by unionism or fascism, and that was the only real two options for at the time. Like that's what they saw. Well, they also saw that there was like a managerial revolution in play, and it wasn't just because of Burnham; it's because of Ehrenreich. And so the thing is like, the new left was kind of just like, oh yeah, the left is fucked. The old left is fucked. The working class movement, it's not going to be the vehicle. Well, we nevertheless want to do something. Let's get after it. And so like, they have to be read that way as actually post-left, and then thinking, well, there's got to be a way to do it still. And then what tends to be the case on the internet today is that the way of critiquing rad lib progressive activism is to say, well, that's not the real left. And then to do this, oh, well, the real left was the old left. And the real issue is the new left. And it's like, no, but
true Scotsman.
We're in the same problem that the new left was in, except that we can see that a lot of the solutions the new left put forward are quickly lent to being dead ends, if not reactive, if not reactionary, sort of solutions. For instance, like just getting behind every national liberation movement and the racialization of all politics, which leads to race war, as though that's like, oh, that's so deep. Because I read the Black Panthers and Angela Davis, so I'm a leftist. I'm deep. Yeah, cool guys. You know how long it's been since then? You want to see how far shit's come? Yeah,
Yeah.
look around.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. This is a lot more fun. I was doing it, but like ranting on my own just didn't feel like I couldn't do it as much. You being here gives me more license to go off, you know?
We're what are we, the roid rage fucking alpha bros or whatever that one dude said?
Yeah, dude. And that was one of those Catrone Zone boys saying that shit.
Yeah, man.
Saying that we're a bunch of roided out frat bros of theory.
Yeah.
And so, if only in a roundabout way, Trotsky's Bolshevism, despite its saturation with hatred for Stalin, leads in the end merely to a defense of Stalinism as the only possible self-defense for Trotsky. So did I read this whole paragraph? Couldn't move to the left. I think I did read that paragraph.
Unsuccessful Bolsheviks is the last one.
Okay, this explains the
Trotsky's own
superficiality of
past
the
and theories. It's Trotsky's own past and theories preclude, on his part, the initiation of a movement to the left of Stalinism and condemned Trotskyism to remain a mere collecting agency for unsuccessful Bolsheviks.
There we go. As such, it could maintain itself outside of Russia because of the ceaseless competitive struggles for power and positions within the so-called communist world movement. But it could not achieve significance, for it had nothing to offer but the replacement of one set of politicians by another. The Trotskyist defense of Russia in the Second World War was consistent with all the previous policies of this, Stalin's most bitter but also most loyal opposition. Trotsky's defense of Stalinism does not exhaust itself with showing how the Civil War transformed the Bolsheviks from servants into masters of the working class. He points to the more important fact that it is the bureaucracy's law of life and death to guard the nationalization of the means of production and of the land. That's a quote. This means that in spite of the most monstrous bureaucratic distortions, the class basis of the USSR remains proletarian. That's another quote. For a while, we noticed Stalin had Trotsky worried. In 1991, Lenin had been disturbed by the question of whether the new economic policy was merely a tactic or an evolution. Because the NEP, National Economic Policy, released private capitalistic tendencies, Trotsky saw in the growing Stalinist bureaucracy nothing else than the first stage of bourgeois restoration. Restoration of a bourgeois order that never existed is the insane part of that. Like, Trotsky's acting like the bourgeois restoration was a... Sorry, it's not a restoration if they didn't have a bourgeois revolution in the first place, bro. They didn't even have a they didn't even have a bourgeoisie, dude. Anyway. But his worries were unfounded. Quote, the struggle against equality and the establishment of very deep social differentiations has so far been unable to eliminate the socialist consciousness of the masses or the nationalization of the means of production and the land, which were the basic social conquests of the revolution. End quote. Stalin, of course, had nothing to do with this, for, quote, the Russian thermidor would have undoubtedly opened a new era of bourgeois rule if that rule had not proved obsolete throughout the world.
The result, state capitalism. With this last statement of Trotsky's, we approach the essence of the matter under discussion. We have said before that the concrete results of the revolution of 1917 were neither socialistic nor bourgeois, but state capitalistic. It was Trotsky's belief that Stalin would destroy the state capitalist nature of the economy in favor of a bourgeois economy. This was to be the thermidor. The decay of bourgeois economy all over the world prevented Stalin from bringing this about. All he could do was to introduce the ugly features of his personal dictatorship into that society which had been brought into existence by Lenin and Trotsky. In this way, and despite the fact that Stalin still occupies the Kremlin, Trotskyism has triumphed over Stalinism. It all depends on an equation of state capitalism with socialism. And although some of Trotsky's disciples have recently found it impossible to continue making the equation, Trotsky was bound to it, for it is the beginning and the end of Leninism and, in a wider sense, of the whole of the social democratic world movement of which Leninism was only the more realistic part. Realistic, that is, with regard to Russia. What was and still is understood by this movement under workers' state is governmental rule by the party. What is meant by socialism is the nationalization of the means of production. By adding control over the economy to the political control of the government, the totalitarian rule over all society emerges in full. The government secures its totalitarian rule by way of the party, which maintains the social hierarchy and is itself a hierarchical institution. The idea of socialism is now in the process of becoming discredited, but only because of the experience of Russia and similar, if less extensive, experiences in other countries. Prior to 1914, what was meant by the seizure of power, either peacefully or violently, was the seizure of the government machinery, replacing a given set of administrators and lawmakers with another set. Economically, the anarchy of the capitalistic market was to be replaced by a planned production under the control of the state. It's just funny, like we got that. We got planned economy. It's just it wasn't what everybody thought it was going to be. As the socialist state would by definition be a just state, being itself controlled by the masses by way of the democratic processes, there was no reason to expect that its decisions would run counter to socialistic ideals. This theory was sufficient to organize parts of the working class into more or less powerful parties. The theory of socialism boiled down to the demand for centralized economic planning in the interest of all. The centralization process, inherent in capital accumulation itself, was regarded as a socialistic tendency. The growing influence of labor within the state machinery was hailed as a step in the direction of socialism. But actually, the centralization process of capital indicated something else than its self-transformation into social property. It was identical with the destruction of laissez-faire economy and therewith the end of the traditional business cycle as the regulator of the economy. With the beginning of the 20th century, the character of capitalism changed. From that time on, it found itself under permanent crisis conditions, which could not be resolved by the automatic workings of the market. Shout out Ted Reese. Monopolistic regulations, state interferences, national policies shifted the burden of the crisis to the capitalistically underprivileged in the world economy. All economic policy became imperialistic policy, culminating twice in worldwide conflagrations. In this situation, to reconstruct a broken down political and economic system meant to adapt it to these new conditions. The Bolshevik theory of socialization fitted this need in an admirable way. In order to restore the national power of Russia, it was necessary to do in a radical fashion what in the Western nations had been merely an evolutionary process. Even then, it would take time to close the gap between the Russian economy and that of the Western powers. Meanwhile, the ideology of the socialist movement served well as protection. The socialist origin of Bolshevism made it particularly fitted for the state capitalist reconstruction of Russia. Its organizational principles, which had turned the party into a well-functioning institution, would reestablish order in the country as well. The Bolsheviks, of course, were convinced that what they were building in Russia was, if not socialism, at least the next best thing to socialism. For they were completing the process which in the Western nations was still only the main trend of development. They had abolished the market economy and had expropriated the bourgeoisie. They also had gained complete control over the government. For the Russian workers, however, nothing had changed. They were merely faced by another set of bosses, politicians, and indoctrinators. Their position equaled the workers' position in all capitalist countries during times of war. State capitalism is a war economy, and all extra-Russian economic systems transform themselves into war economies, into state capitalistic systems fitted to the imperialistic needs of modern capitalism. Other nations did not copy all the innovations of Russian state capitalism, but only those best suited to their specific needs. The Second World War led to the further unfolding of state capitalism on a worldwide scale. The peculiarities of the various nations and their special situations within the world power frame provided a great variety of developmental processes towards state capitalism. The fact that state capitalism and fascism did not, and do not grow everywhere in a uniform manner provided Trotsky with the argument of the basic difference between Bolshevism, fascism, and capitalism, plain and simple. This argument necessarily stresses superficialities of social development. In all essential aspects of the three of these systems are identical and represent only various stages of the same development. A development which aims at manipulating the mass of the population by dictatorial governments in a more or less authoritarian fashion in order to secure the government and the privileged social layers which support it, and to enable those governments to participate in the international economy of today by preparing for war, waging war, and profiting by war. Trotsky could not permit himself to recognize in Bolshevism one aspect of the worldwide trend toward a fascist world economy. As late as 1940, he held the view that Bolshevism prevented the rise of fascism in the Russia of 1917. It should have long since been clear, however, that all that Lenin and Trotsky prevented in Russia was the use of a non-Marxian ideology for the fascist reconstruction of Russia. Bum, 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 bum. Because the Marxian ideology of Bolshevism merely served state capitalistic ends, it, too, has been discredited. From any view that goes beyond the capitalist system of exploitation, Stalinism and Trotskyism are both relics of the past.
Yeah, dude. Ooh is right. We did it though. Great job.
Fucking A, dude.
Great job, everybody. We made it this far. For the people in the live audience, you're all about to be redirected. You're about to raid the premiere of Benjamin Studebaker, Part 2 of the Political Philosophy Overview Trilogy Overview. Nance was there for it live when it went down because it's something that went down for the membership at Theory Underground. Curious about how to become a member, curious about the advantages, the perks, the blah, 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 the ways that makes all of this possible. Watch the little PSA I'm about to roll. Any final thoughts, Nance?
I love this, man. It's a little uncanny at how the shit that was going on 100 years ago, 80 years ago, seems like it has persisted and maybe intensified. And it feels good to have someone who seems to really give a shit. Like, no, like I am a proper Marxist, but this is all bullshit. Like I like that coming from whatever post-Marxist position we occupy or I occupy. Like, Paul Matic is a badass Marxist, and I wish there were more badass Marxists in the world.
100%. 100,000%. Yeah. I love it. And I don't know that any of the next, several of the next readings will not be from this or Yasha Levine, though we will be coming back to them at some point. The Revolution Will Not Be series, this counter-revolutionary revisionist heresy that we're doing here at Theory Underground as a part of our post-Marxist recovery, as a part of trying to free ourselves to see with clear, sober, realistic eyes the actual situation so that we can hopefully go beyond it and get to something better. It's exciting, and I'm glad to have you all here along for the ride. Nance, great to have you back. Everybody, enjoy. All right, take care. Peace. Bye-bye.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of letting others read and think on their behalf, slipstreaming our way into an understanding of the situation that short-circuits the deadlocks of our moment.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
Theory Underground is coming to a city near you. What that has meant in the last year is traveling across the United States, into Canada, and then all over Europe to promote our books, courses, and ideas related to time energy and underground theory. You've been reading Underground Theory.
I'm a publisher and an editor. I run a review of books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Okay, picture this scene. America, early 2021. An Amazon warehouse worker arises from the emerging underground theory internet scene to create spaces for untimely topics and concerns that are too often neglected or kept in isolation today. Joined by a revolving cast of underground theorists, academics, and critics, he establishes what will become Theory Underground, a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for working-class intellectuals, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they're able to do within the confines of academia. That warehouse worker's name is David McKerracher, and his book Time Energy is his first major contribution to the world of theory. It was recently reprinted with a foreword by none other than Slavoj Žižek, who also contributed to Theory Underground's latest book.
My Bible, it's an excellent book.
A collection of essays called Underground Theory.
What you just heard is an excerpt from the Strange Exiles podcast, episode 23, where Bram from Strange Exiles interviewed me and Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. We are publishing one of his books here shortly at Theory Underground. He's also a lecturer at Theory Underground, and he's someone I've been friends and a collaborator with for over 10 years. But most importantly for you all, he's a fantastic lecturer, and it's a crime that he has to do wage labor right now. One of the long-term goals of Theory Underground has been now for a couple of years to hashtag free Mikey. That is something that I've been really pushing, but first I had to get freed from wage labor, which was achieved this year. That's right. Thanks to my monthly seminar subscribers, I was able to quit Amazon and do Theory Underground full time. Now I'm announcing the next big phase of the plan, which is the Mikey Down seminar. What monthly subscribers to the Mikey seminar are paying for is a survey of philosophy, including deep dives into Zizek, Land, Lacan, Baudrillard, Bataille, Lyotard, and ultimately the whole history of philosophy.
We're trying to build like this ongoing seminar, right? And that's what I really like about this thing, where, you know, if I'm teaching a main text, that's something I got to focus on. I got to really, but the seminar thing, we can do this stuff all the time, where we dive deeper into concepts, we dive deeper into certain, you know, sections of books or whatever, and we can really do this nuanced stuff.
I think that there's probably no better way for us to accelerate our learning in these areas than by slipstreaming Mikey. And that has been my belief for years and years and years now. It's official. You're able to help out. You're able to get involved. You're able to benefit directly from liberating him from wage labor. Get on it right now. Do it. Just go. Stop what you're doing. Go click the button. Subscribe. This is what you do. Subscribe to him. If you're already signed up for the ongoing Theory Underground seminars, then that's the ones that I do with my wife, Anne. Though that's getting an upgrade, which means that I will be doing one session per month that is just me, and then I will also be doing the ones with Anne, which are a crash course in sociology, anthropology, the social sciences, and ultimately Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Bourdieu, imminently critiquing pop psychology, sociology, self-help, and ultimately the doxa of our time. But if you would like to be a subscriber to both Mikey's seminar and the seminar that the Snellgrove McCarrickers are doing, then the best way is to become a Tier 4 subscriber, or you can be a Tier 2 subscriber to each of us. The reason this matters is because Tier 2 is like pretty much the best bang for your buck. It gives you huge discounts on all of the courses that we do. But if you can't afford it, Tier 4 is amazing because it gives you Tier 3 access at both Mikey's seminar and ours.
Finally, not everybody has time to be part of these ongoing research seminars, and they just want to fund the paid content for the YouTube and podcast. And so thank you so much to our patrons over at Patreon. They're the ones funding all the free stuff, so big thank you to Bert, Marilyn, Carl, Sahil, Zozandra, Nikolai, Darian, Tyler, and Mandeep, and all the other wonderful Patreon people. Patreon people. And thank you to all the other wonderful Patreon people. Thank you so much to all of you patrons, and also to the special subscribers and the paying subscribers. Oh my god! It's just so awkward. Thank you, Patreon. Patrons. Thank you, okay. And to all the other wonderful patrons. Thank you so much, all you patrons. And also a special thanks to the subscribers on the YouTube side, as well as the paying subscribers over at Substack. Why can't we do this? Fuck. You guys.
Please.
Just thank you. Thank you, everyone, for making this bullshit possible. Thank you to the subscribers. You do it. You did so good. Thanks, guys.